off, excellent. So just so everyone's well aware that this gathering is being recorded today by NOC or Athletics Canada. So just so you're well aware of that. So first off, good evening and welcome to our third gathering of Athletic Canada's Jumps officials. And Happy New Year to everyone. I hope that you've had a tremendous start to 2022. We now have access to the Lower Mainland from Kamloops, British Columbia. The Coquihalla officially opened today. So we'd be able to get food supplies from the coast up to the interior of British Columbia. So that's pretty exciting. So the indoor track season is underway. And I know that officials and jumps for their first meets. I know that the Edmonton officials will begin this coming weekend with the Golden Bear meet. And today's program highlights a presentation by Norma Morgan of Alberta Athletics. Our topic today is horizontal jumps, tips and strategies. And after Norma's presentation, we'll do a second part of the program that will focus on 5 technical issues. And these are being presented by Tim and Janet Slocum from Ontario Athletics, and much appreciate the time and effort that you put into that. Our next meeting, you should make note, will be March the 16th, and it will focus on para-athletics, and Louise Buska will be the presenter. Louise is the para-ITO, and she will make a presentation, both parts of the presentation for us on para-athletics, March 16th, and that will be 5 p.m. Pacific Western Time. So before we start with Norma's presentation, Eric Wittenberg he manages our Zoom meeting. He does all of the technical aspects in relation to the Zoom meeting. Is there any instructions that you have, Eric, regarding any technical issues of how you're going to manage?
Till we're ready for questions, I'm going to mute everybody and then unmute yourself one by one if you have a question to ask, okay?
Maybe the other part of that would be that if you have a question, if you could just introduce yourself and then give the question. That would be a good idea, good format to follow too.
Yeah. Or you can always put the questions in the chat.
Okay, into the chat line. Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent idea. So Norma, I'd like to call upon you at this time, and we'll begin with your presentation. Much appreciated, Norma.
Thank you. First off, I want to thank Mary and Eric Wittenberg for putting together the slide presentation. I've seen it already, and they've done an excellent job, much better than I could have done because I don't know how to do it. So first thing, I am Norma. I'm with Athletics Alberta in Edmonton. I've been an official in level 5. I'm up to now for about 20 years. I've been involved. So I will just get started. Hopefully it won't take too long and you don't have to listen to me talk too much. So what I'm doing is just running through tips on horizontal jumps and just little tidbits that I learned through the years. A lot of them come from a lot of you people that are listening. So first off, most important thing is to arrive on time. I would say at least an hour to an hour and a half before the events to start. And what's very important is to communicate and delegate as a chief. Find out who your jumps referee is or your field referee. These two people are a wealth of information. Number 1 is if you find any safety hazards, tell your ref. That may be other equipment or photographers at the end of the pit that'll be a danger for the athletes when they do their run through. Tell the ref if the runway is not safe. It may have bubbles in the surface or pieces missing, or the wooden board in an outdoor runway may be split. I've had the opportunity to see all of those happen. This also includes just clearing the debris off the runway, as you'll see in that picture that's on the bottom corner there. Have a short brief with
Pardon?
You muted Norma.
Yeah, I know. Norma, can you unmute yourself?
Is that good?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, I'll just go back to the second slide here. Okay, just making sure that the runway and the end of the pit is safe for the athletes. I have had the opportunity to do all of these kind of things at different locations where we've had equipment and even the runway wasn't long enough for the athletes. You may have to have a safety guard there to block runners on the track that are warming up because you've got an athlete that needs an extra length. I've worked on a track that there was bubbles on the surface. There was pieces of the tarmac missing, and one that the wooden board was sunk in the middle. So bring that to your referee's attention. Okay, have a short briefing with the officials prior to the competition, assign their duties pre and post events, switch up their duties, give all the officials that are level 3 and up the chance to do everything. They all need the experience. And I, for one, am guilty of that because I've never done the handheld electronic measure that we have. And I'm really rusty on the yellow flag clock. So I need help there. Tell the officials and the volunteers that they have, if they have any questions or concerns, that they can bring it to you at any time. And of course, if you don't know the answer to their question, either look it up in the book or find out and get back to the person. Don't leave them hanging. The jumps referee and or field referee are a wealth of information, and I myself have gone to them many, many times. Okay, next slide. Okay, start the event on time. If you have 14 athletes in an event and 10 of them at another event, ask your referee how you want it handled. Do they want to take the 4 that are there, give them their first 3 jumps, or hold till everybody else is there? And this, I think I got from Mrs. Slocum, was make yourself a pass sign. It's really handy for the marshal to use so they don't have to run back up and down the track every time an athlete wants to make a pass in their jump. It really works when everybody's jumping in order. It's kind of hard when they're not in order. Okay. During the competition, stop any unnecessary chatter. Everyone likes to have fun, but much chatter causes mistakes. With that being said, I do give special help to the tykes and peewees, as it's important that they have a good experience and continue jumping. I offer them encouragement after every jump. If they foul by wrapping their toes over the edge of the pit, I explain to them and show them what they did. Tell them that it's okay and they have another chance, or that their previous jump was really good and that's what matters. Also during a competition, I put them in a line in a lineup in order and tell them to look who they're in front of and look who's behind them, and remain in that order throughout the competition. And that actually works. Okay, if you are officiating at an international meet or an Olympic qualifying meet, only talk to the athletes if you're giving them their athlete event briefing or if you're the marshal doing call-up. These athletes are in their zone. They don't want to be disturbed. Briefing for the athletes can also be mostly done or partly done in the call room, which saves a lot of time. During a competition, it is not the official's job to tell this level of an athlete that they should move their mark forward or backward, or even tell them that they've had a good jump. That is not our job. That's their coach's job, and the coach is there somewhere. Okay, when combining heats at a competition, remind athletes in the first heat that they must stay in the competition area. Once the second heat is competed and the top 8 will continue to the next 3 jumps. If they choose to leave the area, their names may not be announced to return to the competition. I also tell those who do not make the top 8 if they could remove their marks from a runway, because the next 8 have, or the next how many ever have to put their marks down, and it gets a little bit crowded. In the briefing of the officials, tell them when the first and second recorder are calculating these results to get the top 8, they are to hold their positions. Do not gather around the recorders. The chief and the first recorder will then tell the marshal and the wind gauge operator who and in what order the athletes will be jumping. I, for one, am really quick at getting the top 8, but as soon as somebody stands behind me, I lose it. I've just made mistakes and I can't remember where I've been. So as a chief, you have to develop eyes in the back of your head. Okay, there was a slide there. This is what I do in round 2. I start with the top 8 athletes on my page. And when they're doing round 3, if they do a better jump than they already done, I can slot it in wherever it may fit in the right order. The numbers on the left-hand side are the numbers on the sheet in what order they're jumping. It's a lot quicker than having to put their athlete number down or their name. And by the end of the 3rd round, I've got it done. Okay, so I'll go on to the next one now. Like, as a chief, you have to develop eyes in your back of your head. Athletes do tend to wander over to where their coaches are outside of the competition area, or they use the track for a little bit more warm up. Watch for the athletes handling the video equipment. This is a big one. If the coach wants to get in, and if the coach doesn't like what you're doing or saying to their athlete that they can't hold on to the apparatus, get your ref involved. And then continue on with the event. Let the ref finish talking with the coach. Okay, at the end of each event and each day, delegate both officials and volunteers to clean up the competition site. You can ask the athletes to remove their marks, but that doesn't always happen. So if you've already organized what the officials are going to do at the end of the event, whether it's picking up the tape or placing a longer tape down, sweeping the runway, then it helps get the next event quickly into place. Okay, the next thing is to debrief. Ask if there's any questions or concerns or any comments about the events that you just did. Ask the volunteers if they're interested in becoming an official. Okay, the most important thing though is to thank them for coming. And that is just about all that I had. So is there any questions?
When you set up, do you leave the tape measure along the side of the runway during the competition, or do you pull yours?
I usually like to leave it down simply for the reason, and it depends on what event or what type of event we're doing. I mean, I know it's long jump or triple jump, but I guess it depends on the level of competition. Like if it's a national meet where Olympic qualifying, you would take it up. If it's just a local provincial meet, we usually leave it down. Now, the reason we like to leave it down is because we use those little golf balls on a platform for markers. And if somebody kicks them over, then the athlete may not know where his marker was. With the tape down, he can actually see, oh yeah, it was at 10.4. So he knows where to put it back. We don't have to delay the event. But usually, I sometimes ask the ref if we can leave it down. There are some refs that'll say yes and some will say no.
The reason why I ask is at the World Juniors in Washington, I guess 6 years ago, in the pole vault, one of the pits had the tape down, the other one didn't, and both of them said that was the way it was supposed to be. So I was just wondering if there's some sort of more consistent approach for Canada than there was at the World Juniors.
Yeah. Well, I like to leave it down simply because, and it depends on the markers that they're using, that if they get kicked over, the athlete knows where they put it back down. If we're using duct tape, you don't have that problem, but I still leave it down. It just saves a lot of time.
I want to interject here.
Sure.
I think John's got a valid point, and what I would like to see personally is a consistency across the country as to what we do. Obviously, at a national or higher level competition, which involves all higher level athletes and they're used to it, that's okay. But at the younger levels, I'd like to see a consistency simply because we do have some athletes, 14, 15, 16, who do go across province, officials who travel across the country.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know that we are basically on the same wavelengths as to, yes, we will leave the tape. We're not relying on, well, what they do here in this province or what they do in that province. And then we get into sometimes little competitions between coaches, officials, and athletes across the country. It could be a simple, yeah, we'll leave it down for certain level of competition across the board.
Yeah.
I don't really see a problem with it because, as you said, markers do get met, and it's not a safety problem. It's flat on the runway.
Exactly. Exactly. And if it's windy, you just tape it down with a few more pieces of tape.
Exactly. I have one other point I was just questioning, because I like what you said about with the younger levels, lining the kids up so they see who they're going to follow.
Yeah.
My concern, and I've done this has happened in some of the competitions I've been at younger levels, and I've worked with other officials and sometimes beginning officials, they'll line the kids up on the runway. They'll call their names, and you're first, you're second. And I found what happens then, because the kids are all very young, they think they have to start at that spot on the runway.
Right.
And you've got some kids who can take long runways, some kids who take short, but all of a sudden you see them all taking off from the same spot as the very first athlete came down the runway, or the one that was ahead of them. So I would say line them up off to the side, not on the runway, point out what the runway is all about, and let them know they can start anywhere on that runway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of my tykes and peewees do put down the tape for their measurement where they start. And when I line them up in that line, then I ask them to take one giant step to the right, which will be off the runway. And then that's where they're to go back to and stand in line.
But in a lot of cases, we do a lot of school meets as well, all of us.
Yeah.
And it's just a real show there. So we're kind of even show the people running the events, the high teachers, etc. This is a better way of doing it, because I've had to tell teachers, no, don't line them up on the runway. Don't put them in that order. Get them off the runway. You can line them up, that's fine, but don't do it there, especially at the back of a runway, where some of them are taking 45 meters to run down the runway,
Yeah,
and they're
that's
only
too far.
9 years old. It's
Yeah.
totally silly.
Too far. Yeah, and our marshal is got to be on the ball too, to make sure that they are in that order, that they hear their name being called. And the first time they hear their name called, they're supposed to get ready. The second one is like, get ready because you're going to be on the track next. And the third time they should be on the runway waiting to go.
Yeah, only one on the runway at any time,
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Norma, we've got
Yes.
a question on the chat. Could you go over how you do the handwritten notes on determining the order?
Sure. Okay. The first thing is to make sure you have scrap paper. And what I do pretty much at the end of round two, or getting close to the end of round two, I start with putting down who's in first place, who's in second place, right up to 8. And I leave big spaces in between, so that when round 3 comes and the first jumper, has he gone higher than the number 8 position? If he hasn't, then he's not on the next list. Or I don't add him in. If the second jumper got a better jump than number 7, then I would slot him in under number 6, if that's where he goes, and take number 8 off the list, because now he's out. And it's just a matter of placing first, second, third, all the way up to 8. There. So as you can see, on the third round, jumper number 11 jumped 508. So he comes in after jumper number 2. And then you cross the bottom one off. Number 5 did the same thing. He came in at 502. So you put him above 501, and then you would jump the next one off. As you see, I only have 7 jumps there. But that's the gist of it.
There's a question about the 1 meter zone. I've seen the zone used 3 different ways. One as written for the para-blind athletes.
Yes.
One as written by one of the school boards interpreting what was going on. And I'm not sure if we actually use the 1 meter zone across the country in anything other than the B11s and super young kids.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to speak to that. In our province, we haven't used the 1 meter zone for sighted athletes at any age, or rarely. And I'd like to see an experiment with using it for 9 and 10-year-olds, because I think it's very useful if the coaches know what's going on. And as you say, if there's consistency in doing it, I would really like to see an experiment in doing that consistently across the country. I think it'd be a great benefit in training the athletes and moving the competitions along. So I'd be very interested in that.
Bob, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Bob, you're muttering.
This is Brenda in Saskatchewan, and we've been using the 1 meter board for peewees and younger for quite a while now.
Uh-huh.
Very much like they don't get all uptight about where their foot is on the board. And the biggest issue is trying to get them to quit using the closest part of the 1 meter to get the concept of jumping for wherever. And once they get over that, they do really well. And it goes quite quickly.
That's encouraging.
Yeah, I actually would like to see a progressive board. The next age group goes down to 75, and then the next age group goes to 50 until they're not all uptight about the 22.5 centimeter board.
that's almost like the US high schools allow a 20-inch board as opposed to a 20 centimeter board.
Anything about that?
Yeah, it's in the US high school rules. It's not used in all the states, but it is in the rules.
One meet, I had a teacher working with me and sort of going, holy, why don't we do this in the school system? Because the kids, especially kids that don't do track all the time, really get uptight about
They do.
board.
Yeah. Yep.
In Ontario, our under 12s have been doing it for about 40 years now. And we've now got coaches that want to go back for the young kids taking off from a board, because they figure it's really important to coach the kids to take off from a board.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Eric. Janet Slocum had a signal of a hand up for a question.
Oh.
Yes, Bob, it was the same question that John Caulfield had said about I was questioning about leaving the tape down, because I remembered being out west there in Edmonton, and I noticed that you had left the tape down, and in Ontario, I had always taught my officials, and we had usually said, no, we'll take it up when we're getting ready to start the event. no, prior to the event. I just thought that it looked so much cleaner, especially like I'm not talking about the younger meets. I'm talking about the, you know, national and above. But I've always asked the officials just to take it up. And I was quite surprised when I was out west that you did. That was my first time seeing it being left down. And I think as the referee, I was refereeing, I think it was horizontal jumps at that time. I asked it to be removed, taken up. And we did until the last day. And then I said, all right, you can leave it down. You're so used to leaving it down. We left it down. But it was just sort of policy in Ontario. That's what we do.
Well,
We also give each athlete 2 pieces of tape with their jumping order. So if you're number 11 jumper, you get 2 pieces of tape with 11 on it. Now, in the higher meets, we still do that, but they also have markers, and they can put those markers on top of the tape. And one of the advantages of that is you can control how many pieces of tape are out there. You can control whether or not there's an extra marker out there. And if it's a high level meet, with a marker with the number on it on the ground, put your marker on top of that, you can get your if you kick the marker over, fine, you won't kick the tape off.
Right.
Because we'll put it down with pins if we have to, or the stapler.
Yeah.
If it's raining or whatever.
The tape I'm talking about is different kinds of tape, the duct tape.
Duct tape, yeah.
Yeah.
Another reason why we leave ours down is a lot of our athletes are in different events. So if they're off doing a track event and they're late coming to the first round of horizontal jumps, then they haven't set their mark. They hadn't checked in yet, but we still take them because it depends on the level of the meet. So if the tape is down, they pretty well know where to put their tape to set their mark.
Yeah,
I think you have very good arguments in favor of leaving the tape down.
Yeah.
And there's sorry? For pole vault as well, even though
Any
they
of the
have this
runway ones.
goofy 50 centimeter scale now that you're supposed to have painted down that nobody seems to want to use. But it is a benefit to the athlete to leave the tape down in a number of respects. We're pretty consistent about that at all levels of competition, out beyond the mountains there, which is the most radical province in some respects. And I don't find anything in the rule book which tells us that there is that it's contrary to the rules to have a scale on the side of the runway, because it's something which is consistently there for all the athletes. Right. And not something that an individual athlete is doing to provide a benefit for themselves. So it's hard to see the rule-based prohibition against leaving a tape down.
Mm-hmm.
Sven?
My quick comment is similar to what I said earlier. It would be nice to know, how do we as officials get something that is consistent across the board, so that we're all on the same wavelength? Is there a committee? Is there a group? How do we get something that we say, as far as in Canada, we will be, this is totally acceptable. So coaches know, athletes know, and then officials across the board. I know when we have national to international meets, okay, we're going to use the rules there. But at the lower levels,
but there is no rule.
That's my concern, is that we talk about it. We say we do this, we say we agree with it, but we're still, not everybody is here talking, not everybody's hearing it. And you'll go to a different meet and, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's different. Can we not? How do we do that? How do we get consistency?
Sven, I think what's happening right now, the fact that this concern is being voiced is being heard very clearly by NOC members that are participating in this meeting today. So to me, that would be the start point. That's where it's happening.
Yeah. I'll tell you something that's interests me, Bob. We recently had a little disquisition that came to us from an American official on the new rules. And he signed himself as being the rules chair for the USA National Officials Committee. We don't have an equivalent. And you can even have a rules subcommittee that can look at technical issues and make some recommendations within your country. This probably would be a benefit if there was a rules subcommittee that would deal with interpretations. Anyway,
Well,
this is
taken.
about the closest we've
Well
ever
taken.
had to a rules
So-
committee.
Yeah. So that's just a case too of whatever track meet I'm at, wherever the track meet is, that's a question I always ask my jumps ref or field ref. Is it okay if we leave the tape down or should we take it up?
Can I
I
ask,
know what my answer is going to be.
I'd like to ask the question about, you talk on the extra large boards and stuff like that. We're talking horizontal jumps here. Are you going to apply that to the triple jump too? Because one of the big things, if we talk about being consistent and inconsistent, is the officiating of the triple jump across the country, because we used to have one board. Now we're down to multiple boards at events. We're taping tape boards on the surface. We're going to apply the same thing if we're going to put down a new board. Are we going to make it larger for the younger kids? Are we going to keep it the size it's supposed to be, just to be consistent across the country? Are we going-
Barclay,
Yeah.
the TDSB uses a 1 meter zone and puts 3 of them 1 meter apart for their public school triple jump meets.
Yes.
Aha.
Well, I'm not talking about
And
public school here. I'm talking club level here, even the youngest club levels, to be consistent across the country. What size of tape down boards are we going to put, and how many boards are we going to put? Because the long jump is fairly straightforward. It's one jump board area, no matter what size we say. But the triple jump has got so many other factors in it.
Yes, it does.
What's being done across the country? Is there anything consistent anywhere? What has anybody seen?
Well,
Vary from meet to meet.
My
Yeah.
comment would be going right back to John, what John Cull said. Sounds to me like we need a committee out there that's going to take a look at all what we're saying here, put it to a pen and get a consensus across this country. So we're not all doing different things. Figure out what is the best, not just even at the public school, as John Caulfield said, what the Toronto board does, or what the board that I work in does, or what somebody else does at the Mike Tyke Adam program in Ontario. But what seems to work, and let's get some consistency. So the kids coming from this country are consistent and know what's happening.
Well,
Yeah.
one thing, you're talking about kids, you've also got to include masters.
yes.
And in Edmonton, our boards are 7, 9, and 11, 7, 9, 11, and 13. And we have masters that want a 6 board. I've got one male master now that wants a 5 board. That has to be taped in, and we do it for his safety. And
Yes.
I'd much rather have him jump and be safe than try it at a 7 and break his neck.
Yeah.
There's one master's lady who's jumping from a 5 as well.
Well, I had a 90-year-old jumping from a 2 meter board, so there you go, in triple jump. But we have sort of one rule of thumb that we practice out there beyond the mountains, which is no more than 3 boards in any competition, just to keep you from going crazy.
Yeah.
But
Question
we
two
have
on,
painted stripes across at almost every meter mark under 9 meters.
And to be
It's a
consistent-
20 centimeter painted line that we use as a guide.
where does one put the flag, or the indicator for
Fault?
wind gauge, for example? Where do you put that when you've got several boards involved? We're
I
so,
put it at the longest board that's in play,
Yeah, I agree.
I do too, but I'm just
assuming
wondering,
that that's where your records are going to come from.
mostly, yes.
Oh, true, but
Okay, I'm going to bring this to a close, this section of the meeting to a close. The questions, the comments are very pertinent and very meaningful, and I can assure you they're being heard. So I've made note of a few of the things that have been brought up here today, and we'll see where that goes in terms of the NOC committee.
Oh, it has Athletics Canada has an active rule committee. Oh, there you go. Didn't know.
I'm not sure what to say.
Who's on it?
So Norma, is there anything that you would like to say to sum up?
Not really, because, all I can say is I just want to thank most of the referees that joined in, because I've learned a lot from you, like Bob, yourself, John and Carol Call, the Slocums for sure, especially Mrs. Slocum. I learned a lot from her when we were in Kamloops. It's been great working with most of you that are online here.
Okay, Norma, well, again, thank you very much for the time and effort that you put in to your presentation for today. And we all wish you luck next weekend or this coming weekend at your Golden Bear meet, indoor meet. So you're kicking off the season. So
Correct.
thank you very much.
Thanks.
At this point, I would like to move to Janet and Tim Slocum, who have prepared for us 5 technical issue questions. And those questions were part of the last announcement. And after this meeting is over, we'll have Eric. Eric will send out the answers, the written answers to each one of these horizontal jump situations.
Answers.
Answers are now on the screen.
Oh, there you go. So the answers are on the screen. So Janet and Tim, if I could turn this over to you then.
Well, you've got the answers on the screen, and basically it was an exercise to take 5 different situations and see if you can find the rule in the new book, because that took a lot of time. So this pretty well looks after it.
I'm disappointed that you don't have to find the answers that we've given them to you ahead of time, but that's okay. I think it's a good exercise to do, because especially with this COVID, we haven't been doing these, Tim and I haven't been doing meets. So like it was a good refresher just to find questions, and then we had to find the answers in the new rule book, which was as Tim said, a real exercise in learning, but we're going to have to do it again once we get the 22 rule book.
Anybody have any discussion about question 1A, parts 1, 2, and 3?
So maybe you could just take us through it from a discussion point of view.
Yeah, okay. Well, there were 3 different situations that we set up. One was 7 athletes, and of course that's a rule where if you have fewer than 8, everybody goes regardless. So best of 6. Then there was one with 9 athletes, and athlete 8 and 4 have identical first and second rounds, and then they both fault their third attempt. So the answer we felt was all 9 athletes compete in rounds 4 and 6.
Okay,
and
this is
Tim?
Yeah.
I would like to discuss this.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's say athlete number 8 and number 4 are the top 2 finishers on the first 3 rounds. Then I disagree with the answers on there, because only the top 8 jumps with record will go into the final. The question in there did not say number 8 and number 4 are tied for 8th place.
Over if you go down.
Valid point, Bing. The assumption was that they were 8th and 9th, at least in my mind.
What do we have here?
The athlete who is tied for 8th place would continue. My recollection of the rule
Yes.
So you would take the top 8 athletes plus anyone who tied for 8th place. And they're tied, are they not?
Yeah, they could be tied for first place.
Yeah, well, in this
Hmm.
instance,
Yeah, we had an assumption.
yeah.
It could be
So-
tied for anywhere from first
Yes, you're
to
right.
seventh.
So
That's true.
The
Yeah.
rule's not written well.
The
You're
question
right.
isn't written as well as it could have been, but that's my fault. I always take the blame.
No, I just want to bring out that point so that everyone will know.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Majority of the people will assume it's tied for 8th place.
Who's that? Is that
Person in
Bing?
9th place
Bing,
is-
if you look in B, go down here. Move it
I
down.
can't move
Oh,
it.
you can't move it. Okay, in B, example 2,
Here we are.
here it is. Okay, now you can see it. It says that the athletes that are tied, which were those two numbers, 4 and 8, I think, 8 and 4. All right, they have to go first before the other athletes because, and they go in the order they appear on the event sheet. So therefore 4 would go before 8 and then the other 7, right?
And that's the assumption that they were the last 2.
Yes,
Sorry about that, Bing.
Okay,
that's our fault.
Yep.
I have a question too. Number one, 7 athletes, 2 have no trials. I thought that was a rule change this fall, that if you have no good jump in the first 3 rounds, you don't continue on for the last 3.
Okay, I'd like to comment on that. Because I saw the same thing in early versions of the new rule book.
Yeah,
When they announced the rules that would be incorporated in the new rule book, that was the case. But when you look at the actual 2022 rule book online, it's changed. And so it now no longer says they have to have a valid attempt in order to progress.
okay. Yeah,
So
we don't have the
there was
new
a
rule
change
book.
of thinking
No,
somewhere in the process. of
John,
developing a new
These
rule.
questions were specifically on the 2020 rule book,
Yeah,
because nobody has the 2020
well.
rule book.
yeah, we didn't have that, so we went with the 2020.
And you're correct, the 2021 rule book says that if anybody has not got a valid jump, they do not advance, period. And if you went with less than 8, you go with less than 8. But as John just said, the 2022 book now is saying you
Yeah.
take 8.
But they didn't change it.
I
But the
guess we'll have to
2021
wait till we
says-
get our rule book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just went online to the IAAF site.
Okay,
Good point. So Janet, if maybe we can move on to the next one.
okay. The 10 athletes, okay, number 3 of number 1. Okay, so we have 10 athletes, 3 have no valid trials. And again, because the rule book states that 8 will go, since there are 10, the top 8 valid performances are eligible to go on to 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
All right, and then we only have 7. Only 7 have at least 1 valid performance.
Based on the 2021.
And again, this is the 2020 rule.
So
book.
what would you do in that case? John, go.
Sir,
On the new book, would
Yes.
that mean all 10 go?
no,
Yes.
I don't see a change in the 2022 rule book. It still says athletes must have a valid performance in order to advance.
Okay,
So I don't believe that that has changed.
okay, so this one is right.
Okay,
Yes,
okay,
Okay.
all right. So is that okay for number 1?
Good discussion, Janet.
I do have a question about the whole thing. I guess I'm looking at the 2022 book.
Yeah.
And it goes in and says, valid trials have a measurement associated with it. But in the next few lines down, I think that was like 25, 7 in the technical rules. And then I think it was around 25, 6. All 3 would go on because they specifically stated that 8 or more, if there's a tie for that last place, anybody that ties
But,
would be moving on into it.
but I think the question of the validity of the
Yeah, and
trial would
let's-
supersede the tie. There was no tie because they don't have a valid trial.
No,
Well, the valid trial is indicated by a measurement. And then they go on to the next part and they basically contradict that with under 8 people, even if none of them have valid jumps. They're moving on. And I was like, okay, so which rule are we following? And that's all on page like 159, 160 in the,
Can I add something? The way I read the rule is pretty over here.
If I could comment as a referee, I have lived this experience at the National Championships in Montreal many years ago, where there were 9 jumpers in the long jump. It had a fairly tough standard to make, but there were 9 that qualified. After the first 3 rounds, 2 athletes had fault. In other words, they had no valid jump.
Right.
And so I had to make a decision, and this is based upon the rule book back then. And I ruled that there would be jumping 7 in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round. That those 2
Right.
jumpers did not have a valid performance in my discussions with them. I told them so, and they accepted that and then left the scene. I asked the jury of appeal after what they thought about it, and most were in agreement with me that I had made the right decision. There is
Right.
another situation now that could happen today, that athletes can now ask to compete under protest. And so let's say that same scenario, those 2 jumpers said, well, we want to compete under protest. Do we as an official then say, okay, you can compete under protest and let them jump in the 4th, 5th, 6th round? And then, of course, they protest have to go to the jury, but the jury will make a decision as to whether they accept the performance or they throw it out.
Don't they have to protest a jump?
Yes.
Well,
They would have to protest some judgment call on a jump,
yeah.
whether it was fair or fault.
Yeah.
That's possible to protest, but I don't think you can protest a decision that's made on a clear statement in the rule book
Yeah. We see
as
it
far as advancement.
We see it in sprints all the time, where a sprinter false starts at the start of a race and will say, well, I want to run under protest, and it's granted, and then they do race under protest.
It may be granted or it may not.
So a false start is similar to a false, a fault in the long jump. I mean, and being the devil's advocate here, I'm searching for your opinion. Here's a chance to test the minds of the people that are in the know. If we do let them jump under protest and then look at it from the jury of appeals point of view.
Yes.
It's an
Barclay, I was,
Yes, you can. Sorry.
Barclay, I was going to say that the starters and track referees have been told not to let the people make the run under protest unless there's a valid reason, and the referee has to decide that the reason that they're protesting is actually valid.
Yeah, the same thing.
Hey, this has been, Barclay, really appreciate your input, and it's really, good food for thought, and that's the whole purpose of what we're doing here today. Janet, I'd like us to move on if we could. We're now at coming up to almost an hour, and so I'd like to move on, please.
Okay, well, let's look at number 2 then. We've got 9 athletes, seems to be a common number on the start list, okay? The athlete whose name is listed as the first jumper on the event sheet arrives after round 1 has already begun, and 5 athletes have taken their first jump already at this time. All right, the question was, do you allow this athlete to have his first round jump out of order? Well, we discussed this, I think most of you would agree. Of course, he's going to get his jump, but before he has to do it, before the last jumper on the event or competition sheet, so that when he comes back and resumes his place as the first jumper in the competition, because he was on the event sheet as jumper number 1, for round 2, he wouldn't have 2 jumps in a row. So, you know, you could put him, maybe if there were 9, he could, 5 have gone, so there's 4 to go, counting him. So maybe let another jumper go. He could be number 8. He could be, as long as he's not the last one, because we don't want to run into the problem of having consecutive jumps for no reason. Like, there's no reason for that.
I've had
Okay.
that happen quite often, and the athlete has had to jump in the last of the round simply because he's taking too long to change his shoes.
Well,
And I've told him, you're going to end up having to do 2 jumps back to back. And it was like, well, that's okay.
well,
Janice,
that's
can-
his choice.
Can I
Open.
have this discussion as well too?
Yeah.
Okay, this is all based on the beginning of the horizontal jump situation that for discussions.
Yeah.
And you said this is a national championship meet. A national championship meet would have call room. And after coming to your event without coming from the call room are not allowed. That's my understanding.
Correct. I mean, I'm questioning the first yes about allowing the athlete a first round jump at all if they were not there when the competition began.
Unless
That's not a given.
Yeah, unless the competitors came with the call room ref.
Yes, that's true.
But again, we're reading into this, okay? Like, you're right in what you're saying. But as far as
This says boys, you know, we're
Yeah.
talking
Does.
little boys. Let's, you know, I'm thinking 10-year-olds, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that age group, most of them are doing several events, not just long jump. They're running, they're doing high jump, they're throwing.
True. If
And
they're in
they events happen all at the same time.
If they're in
Yeah,
a simultaneous event, then you can change their order in the round for sure.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think the
That's-
key
that's a
here is,
standard rule.
this is Swen speaking. I think the key here is that, forget about the nationals where we have call-in areas.
Yeah.
For most meets, we have kids doing multiple events all over the place. As long as they've got them, they know that when they come back, they have to get a jump off in the first round someplace, but the rule wants them not to be the last person of that particular first round. Then they can go back to their normal situation. They might have to leave again in the second round to go do another event and come back and be the third in the
Yeah.
second event,
Yeah.
or even in the third trial. They could
Yeah.
be the 5th person because they're going back and forth, as long as they're not having to go first and last in 2 different rounds. And basically, that's all it says.
Right.
Okay, Janet?
All right, let's, and so you see the other questions. I'm sure if you do allow him a jump in the first round, does he get a practice jump? Of course, you all know he doesn't. And of course, he can't have 2. I mean, I think that was just a given. However,
Two jumps in the same round.
let's go on to number 3 then. And I think really, if you check your rule book, I find this in the new, at least, and even in the 21, there's all kinds of instances where this can happen, and I think it's pretty straightforward. The fact that the person was injured, and the fact that nothing was, no rules were broken during the jump, and they respected the pit. Nothing was moved, you know, nothing was she was lifted from the pit by the medical staff.
And that's the most important part.
Yes, the medical staff appointed by the organizing committee. It's not the chief judge. Nobody steps in to do it. It's it has to be somebody from the medical side. And our question was, is this a valid jump? Well, yes, of course it is, because it was followed. If you read the rule, it's quite extensive on page 98 and 99. that it's all done. Everything was very professionally done, so therefore it is a good jump. If you check out page 98, 99. Any questions about that?
We have two people
Oh,
that have
Richard.
questions.
Richard's got his hand up.
So if a sprinter trips but stays in their lane and then is taken out by the medical staff while staying in their lane, is that assistance? And similarly, is this one here, because it doesn't look like a legal exit? Is it a legal exit because the appointed medical crew helped with the exit?
Okay. Could we look at in the 2020 rule book 6.4.7, which allows physical support from an official or other person designated to recover to a standing position or to access medical assistance, right? Is not considered illegal assistance if they're being supported to go to access medical assistance. So if you're helping somebody out of a pit and getting them on a wheelchair to go to medical assistance, they have not had illegal assistance. So to me, it's a valid trial.
Yeah.
So I had the same general question as Jeff, though, that I've always considered that you haven't completed your trial until you have validly exited the pit and your foot steps out at a point beyond the point of entry into the first mark into the pit. So it seemed to be a bit of a conflict there because we have plenty of situations where people, athletes land and then in absence of mind, they step back or something like that when they're stepping out, and that's invalid. We don't say, hey, don't step back. So this type of assistance to me raises that question. I mean, my heart goes out to the person that's landed in that situation, but they've actually been assisted not just in getting up, but in completing a necessary part of the jump, which is the exiting of the pit.
Yes.
That's why 647 is there, because it says it's okay to do that.
Yes, it's a new rule, 6.4.7, as you see from the double lines beside it.
Yep.
And I think it's meant to supersede that decision based on whether they've exited the pit correctly or not,
Okay.
because they're being assisted to access medical attention. And that's my belief in it, at any rate, that I would see that as superseding the question of legal exit.
Right.
I agree, John.
I agree too.
Yeah.
I agree with it wholeheartedly, but what happens if while the athlete is laying in the pit and you've got two people, one on each side of them, what happens if the mark now gets erased or gets trampled on?
That's a problem.
Exactly.
Unless they have already observed which is the correct mark, so that they're able to measure from it.
Have a flag there.
So you might
We need to buy
have to
some
give them
BDM
a
units.
replacement trial, which they're not able to take. So
This is Swen speaking. I'd hate to be the official if I had an athlete hurt on their jump, landing in the pit, who's sitting there in agony, tell them, in order for me to mark that, you got to touch the outside of the pit in front of your mark.
Well,
I'd hate to be the official
I
doing
had
that.
that, no, I had that happen to me.
before
at
this
an
rule
indoor
change,
meet,
I had been in that situation. I said, just move your foot
yeah.
out there and touch the edge of the pit, please.
And it doesn't have to be the
Exit,
foot.
and
It's
then
the
we can
first
take you out of
contact
here.
outside and front.
Jane Edstrom has a question, Eric.
I don't have a question, just a clarification. The trial isn't over until the athlete exits the pit. And the athlete has to exit the pit under their own duress.
No.
It's
But-
similar to in a race. If your torso doesn't go across the finish line, you haven't finished the race. So the intention of Rule 6.4 that you've been alluding to is that if an athlete falls in the middle of a race, they may be helped to a standing position and they can continue on. They're not disqualified.
That's
It's
right.
very different in a field event. The trial isn't over and can't be measured until the athletes exit the pit, in the case of a throw, when they've left the circle.
So you don't see 6.4.7 super.
No, it
superseded.
doesn't. No, it does not supersede.
Yeah. Well, I was also taught all the way up from when I was level 1 that if an athlete injures himself in the pit, as an official, you do not touch them. You bring in their coach, you bring in their parents, bring in the paramedics if they're there, or first aid. But officials were not allowed to touch the athlete if they're still in the pit.
Certainly better if medical staff do, yes.
Yeah.
But does that make the jump valid or invalid? This is a whole question.
It still depended on whether they could make it out of the pit on their own steam.
Well, I had that happen at the Van Wijswijk 5 years ago. And the athlete jumped in the pit. We went to help and I was told, stop. If you go help, the jump is invalid. And I was told that right there and then by the chief or whatever. So
yeah,
that was 5 years ago though, and it could have changed. So,
Well,
This
you-
is the rule. Yeah.
I would think 647, Norma, when you were saying how you were taught, don't, at that point in time, don't touch him, because, but because this rule with the double lines on the right-hand side, 647, it says receiving physical support from an official or other person designated by the organizers to recover to a standing position. But if this person was hurt so badly that they couldn't stand, obviously they needed a wheelchair. That's why I thought 647, or Tim and I thought that would cover it. But
Yeah.
Jane says no. So
yeah.
Right. Well, it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see this go to a jury, wouldn't it?
yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
we pick these questions.
Good question, Jane. Thanks for your input. Appreciate that. I'm sure we're all going to be taking a second look at this one. Janet, if I could get you to move on to number 4.
Wait, number 4. All right, number 4. Here. All right, so we've got, doesn't matter that it's the deck long jump, but an athlete follows his first 2 jumps because of sporadic changes in wind direction and velocity. On his 3rd attempt, the timing judge was talking to another athlete and forgot to put up the yellow flag when 15 seconds remained. At 60 seconds, the timing judge shouts time fault and indicates to the flag judge to raise the red flag. The athlete protests and says that he should get that last 15 seconds to take his last jump as the yellow flag had not been raised. Now, if you have a referee there, then of course, this is a matter for the referee to deal with. And you would, as the chief judge, have to explain to if the referee were to come back, in that case, explain what happened. And we felt that that jumper should get a whole jump, like a substitute jump with full time. And again, if there's no referee that's there, then the chief judge has to tell the athlete that since there was no visible clock in use, a substitute jump will be given. And then when the referee arrives, you can go ahead and talk about this too with him or her regarding the decision. And if you look on page 170, that's the rule called replacement trials now, 2518. And the referee, that's his job in order to, he holds that responsibility to give him another jump. Because it's the official's fault that he's the one that's talking.
Correct.
And, how do you feel about that?
Well, the other thing I looked at too is the person on the flags does not have the authority to call a fault. It's still up to the chief.
That was.
once
Okay.
that yellow flag goes
Yep.
up or down. The chief still calls it a fault or not the flag person.
No.
Jeff,
One of the key
hand
issues
raised.
here for me is that the rule book says shall raise a yellow flag, does not say should raise a yellow flag. So that means that is something that the official must do in order to ensure that it's a valid trial. So I think that this answer is correct and that a referee might give a replacement trial because not adequate information wasn't given to the athlete. If it said should, that would be a different issue. But it says shall.
Jeff has his hand raised, Eric.
Okay, well, this one here, number 4, refers to consistent procedure for all athletes, and there is a gap in the procedure, so that's one of the ways you can look at that. But the fact that you give the athlete their jump and record it, and so you have the information, and if there's a decision to be made, you can use the information or not. It also refers back to the previous one where you can, if you can do so without messing up medically the person lying in the sand, get the measurement. You can write it down in a corner of Norma's scrap paper for reordering, but at least you have the information. So if there's a decision made, yes or no, regarding the validity of the previous jump, you have the information to use.
Janet, any other comments?
There's no reordering done in that because deck athletes only get 3.
Right.
Yeah, that was a deck long done.
And the question is it the deck referee or the jumps referee?
No, it'd be the
John
deck
Caulfield.
referee.
What is this?
Yeah. Right, yeah, no, he's got a point there, because the
That's a very good point.
multiple jumps, people look after you, right?
The combined events referee would do it. But he may be over with the women or maybe over with the guys, and it was the girl that had the problem.
Okay, number 5, Janet.
All right, the last one.
Thank you.
This is something that we have talked about as officials for years and years, almost our 50 years. All right, this is talking about in measuring the jump, the officials differ as to the exact place and landing area from where the measurement of a jump should be taken. All right, the question is the marker placed A, at the jumper's actual point of entering the sand? Is it the mark made by the closest splash mark? Any mark made by anything that was attached to the body at the time it made a mark in the sand? Or the mark made by a hat or something else that fell off in the pit before the jumper lands? All right, and we've discussed this but we found that it's actually 29.9. We look up the measurement. Okay, it says the measurement of each jump shall be made immediately after each valid trial from the nearest break in the landing area made by any part of the body or anything that was attached to the body at the time it made a mark to the takeoff line or takeoff line extended. And so what do you, I guess we didn't actually put a mark on the right one, but what do you think?
Eric John Caulfield has a question.
Okay, John.
I was going to say C, but there's one small problem. It doesn't talk about the mark being closest to the scratch line. So it's my fault again for the wording.
John, I took that right out of the rule. Made by any part of the body. Okay, I didn't put to the takeoff line or takeoff line extended. But we've had this discussion many times. I know all of you have had to make a decision on this.
Yep.
And we talked about it and talked about it. When Tim and I worked on this, C was what I was aiming for. Because actually the hat could be attached to the body, you know, it's on the body. If this person had a hat, but the little catch for that one was before falling off in the pit before the jumper lands. I threw that in.
So it's A and C.
Yes.
So do you feel C is the right answer?
Or A.
A and C.
A
or C.
Actual, well, yes, because I mean that's the most obvious one, the jumper's actual point of entry in the sand.
So not B, not D.
No.
No. Janet, do you remember this happening in Kamloops at the World Masters Indoor? A German athlete.
Oh golly, Norma, you're younger than me. You got a better memory.
Probably not by much, but the athlete jumped. He was wearing baggy track shorts.
Okay.
And we could clearly see the mark in the sand of his shorts.
Yep.
We had, I think she was probably a level 3 going for level 4 chief. You had gone to the call center to get the next set of athletes because we only had 1 pit, not 2 running. So we're always behind schedule.
Yeah.
And the fight was on. I told her, no, you measure from where the point of entry is for his shorts. The athlete said, no, you measure from my foot. So and the fight was on. The fight was on between the 3 of us. And she stood there saying, well, I don't know. I said, well, look, Tim's right there. Go get him. No. I'm just going to let him have it. I'm just going to give it to him. I said, you can't. Let him jump under protest. I mean, I'm only a level 3 at that time. I says, you let him jump under protest or wait till Janet comes back. No, I'll just give it to him. So she did. I was astounded and I kept my mouth shut from then on.
Oh, you should have told me. Now you're telling me how many years later.
2.
All these years.
I thought you would have heard about that. Yeah, it shut me down completely. But yeah,
I gotta look for the jury of appeal.
Yeah, I don't think
it's gonna bother me.
I've also had it here in Edmonton, but it was a younger fellow, just a kid, and he constantly wanted to wear his ball cap. So I took him aside before we started the competition and I said, look, if you're going to wear your hat, we're going to measure any of your jumps at where your hat lands in the pit if it falls off. We will not measure from your foot to your butt, whatever comes first. It'll be by that hat. He took his hat off. And sure enough, he did pretty good. But
good for you, Norma. That's good.
Yeah.
You're a good official.
Thank you.
Thank you. Unless there are any other questions, Tim and Janet, obviously, we've created an evening or a couple of evenings of discussions and investigation of checking the rule book and looking at how to manage interesting and peculiar situations in horizontal jumps. So again, on behalf of all of us, I would just like to say thank you very much. You without a doubt created some very thoughtful discussion, some of which has an answer at the moment, others which will be further explored by, I'm sure, many people that have participated here. So yeah, I guess we all have a little bit of homework to take away from today. So again, thank you very much, all of you that have participated. I'm just looking down at my screen. We have 40 people that have participated today, so our numbers are increasing and much appreciate people that have come on board. Eric, is there anything that you would like to say at this time?
No.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to bring the meeting to a conclusion. Just a reminder that March is our next meeting and the discussion will focus on para. And I look forward to seeing all of you then. And your endeavors in track and field for the next 3 months, I wish you well in events that you'll be officiating at. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone.
May I ask a question?
Bing, go right ahead.
It's Bing. Has anyone used the new rule on this 90-degree plasticine, the 7mm 90-degree plasticine on the horizontal jumps? And
Yeah.
is there any problem doing the 90-degree plasticine?
Not us, no.
No, no problem.
One side note to that, Finish Links has adapted their front-facing camera to act as a video confirmation for the new fault rule.
Really?
And you can use the camera with their new version 12 software. One of the guys in Europe has posted images of a meet that he was doing with it, and it seems to be working almost as good as the expensive stuff from Seiko and Omega.
Good point.
Good. We'll look for that.
Okay.
Uh,
Thank you.
Brenda here, we actually had a little mini meet last week and we got to try our new boards. And they were just fine. We had
Really?
the scene on them. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Victoria will probably get them 10 years from now.
Okay.
Could
Good night, all. Thank you very
you
much.
send the info to us about the video stuff? Because we're looking.
It's on the Finish Links website,
Okay.
and your
I know
photo
that.
timer probably has access to that information. You may even have a camera.
No, we just got a new one.
Yeah, but it's a front-facing camera, not just the timing camera.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, all.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, everyone.
Bob, thanks, Eric.
Good night, March.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Goodbye.